What's up, everybody? Welcome to a glimpsing ramble. The last time I done one of these was a while ago, and it was the different marks of power armor for Space Marines. It was a fun ramble to do. A little bit ago, I got a comment on that video asking me to do a bolter video, and I never got around to doing one in the past because the more I thought about it, the more I thought it'd be kind of difficult to do and a bit weird. But I am trying to go through my backlog of requests that I can find easily enough. YouTube is making it more difficult to find these things sometimes, it feels like, but I did stumble across this one. And when I first saw it, I was giving it thought in the back of my mind. And when I saw it again, I'm like, all right, I think I got an idea of how to do it. So welcome to that Ramble video. I'm going to do it a bit different than I did the Power Armored Ramble from a while ago. And I'm going to lay down the criteria for what we're looking at in this video. We're looking at just the bolt gun, also known as a bolter. We're not looking at bolt pistols, storm bolters, call pattern bolt rifles. We're not looking at heavy bolters. We're not looking at the Vulcan mega bolter, which, yes, is a bolt weapon and functions the same way, just with a huge rotary weapon platform with huge bolts that it fires. So it's kind of hilariously awesome. Just looking at the bolter. Specifically, we're looking at the Adeptus Astartes pattern. So we're looking at Space Marine bolters. They are synonymous with the bolt gun. It's a shock assault weapon without peer. They are shock assault troopers in the Imperium without peer. They go hand in hand with each other. And that's why I'm looking at it. They are the ones that kind of are the poster children of 40k for sure, you could say. And the ranged weapon of choice of theirs, the bolt gun, is kind of their poster child ranged weapon. You ever see a piece of modern art, and I say modern, I just mean Mart from not a while ago, but basically, if you've ever seen art of a Space Marine from 4th edition forward, in a codex or anything like that, and it's just a standard Space Marine wielding a standard bolter, it's going to be a particular pattern, which we'll get to later, but it's going to be a bolter. It's not going to be a plasma gun. It's not going to be a melted gun. You'll see that in art, but when it's the hero pose, it tends to be a bolter and a chainsword or something like that. Sometimes a power fist, whatever. Anyways, tangent. My point is, we're looking specifically at Space Marine bolters because the Space Marine bolter is specifically the most powerful handheld ballistic anti-infantry weapon in the Imperium. The human-sized pattern of bolters are considerably smaller than the Space Marine bolter. Thus, the caliber they fire is going to be smaller. And ipso facto, in a very basic nutshell, I'm not going to get into ballistics here, but in general, the raw power is going to be less because it's a smaller bolt, a smaller casing, less powder, yada, yada, yada. Anyways, so we're looking at Space Marine bolters, specifically just the bolt gun. And how I'm going to do this is I'm going to break down this weapon system. I'm going to kind of go over what it does, how it acts, and everything like that. And in doing so, I'm going to spend considerable time talking about the round it shoots, which is known as a bolt, specifically looking at just the standard issue bolt rounds, not the special issue stuff, just standard issue. So once you have a basic idea of that, you can really extrapolate all that honestly useless fluff information because it's a fictional universe, but you can extrapolate all this information to look at bolt pistols, heavy bolters, even the Vulcan mega bolter, because it all functions the same way. So after going over the weapon platform that is the bolt gun, I'll be going over different patterns of bolt guns, specifically calling out 4 total patterns with some honorable mentions here and there. So with that said, let's have some fun with it and just dive right in. So, Space Marine bolters. Space Marines are synonymous with the bolt gun, but it's actually not the first weapons they were issued as standard weaponry. At the very early parts of the Great Crusade and the tail end of the Unification era, Space Marines were equipped with what we now know as Volkite weapons. Volkite weapons are thermal ray weapons. Considerable destructive power for their size, but very temperamental, very difficult to produce, very high maintenance and difficult to maintain, and just logistic-wise not suited for a ever-expanding battlefront that is the Great Crusade. But that is what Space Marines are first equipped with because it was unsurpassed stopping power for its size. But though they do lack effective range. And if you look at some early art of Space Marines, you'll see them wielding some type of weird type of ray weapon that has since been come to be known in more recent times as the Volkite weapons. So that's what they first had. However, to meet the ever-expanding demand, that weapon was replaced with the Boltgun as a standard issue weapon, and the rest is history, you could say. So, the Boltgun is an assault weapon that fires explosive kinetic rounds, which are referred to as bolts. So, it's called a bolter or a bolt gun because it fires bolts. Easy enough. It's a fearsome weapon, the explosive rounds ripping through flesh, blowing apart the enemy, causing tremendous psychological trauma as well as physical trauma and death. It's a perfect shock assault weapon in the hands of shock assault troops without peer in the Imperial Space Marines. So it works out very well. So the interesting thing is you have a weapon system really specifically defined by the round it fires. So to know about the bolt gun, we have to know about the bolt. And what a bolt is not necessarily just a big bullet, but is actually a miniature rocket that's fired like a bullet. So first things first, bolter ammunition, a standard bolt caliber, it still does a caliber like a bullet does, is 75 caliber. That became the conventional standard caliber size for bolters in the Imperium. The non-conventional sizes we've seen outside of that have been 70 caliber, 60 caliber, even a bolt pistol from the Space Marine Legion's time period of a 50 caliber bolt. So 75 caliber is pretty big. While we have even bigger rounds than that in the real world, what we kind of know is the quintessential really big mamma jamma round is the 50 caliber, right? For bullets. And the standard bolter is a miniature rocket that is 75 caliber, so it's a big boy. Now, this is where it separates from being a bullet. It looks like a big bullet, it has a casing like a bullet would, but the bolt itself is a miniature rocket. And it's not just like, ooh, that sounds really impressive. No, it has a 2-stage ignition sequence for the bolt round itself. So it has this because the rocket propulsion that the bolt is actually using once it leaves the bolter builds up so much pressure it would warp the barrels and damage the bolt gun. So to avoid this, they first launched the bolt itself out of the barrel like a conventional bullet. That's what the casing is for. The casing is there, and it is full of what is referred to as the main charge, full of some type of propellant. I'll just call it gunpowder. And it gets ignited, thus shooting the bolt out of the barrel. It separating it from the casing and flies down the barrel to be ejected out of the barrel at high speed. The moment it is out of the barrel via pseudo sorcery, technical capability, whatever, the moment it has been ejected from the barrel, the second stage of its solid rocket fuel ignites, thus propelling the bolt continuously downrange until it's out of fuel, of course. But my point is, unlike a bullet, which constantly is losing velocity and height since the moment it's fired, the bolt theoretically would maintain its velocity and height to its target for as long as it has fuel, the solid rocket fuel. And once it hits its target, it has a mass reactive fuse, is what it's referred to. And it's designed to be able to penetrate a target before detonating within. So it is an explosive round. It is a miniature rocket. It's going to penetrate a bit, not just detonate on the surface. Though against people, that would still be more than effective. But against big Xenos and warp-tainted filth and whatever else, having it penetrate in hurts. Having it blow up inside hurts even more. It makes healing and stitching up said wound much more difficult. So the idea is to cause maximum damage to leave little chance for survival, and that's how the standard bolt ammunition works. The special issue stuff, like Kraken rounds, Dragonfire, and so forth, work a bit differently, but the principle is still the same for delivering the bolt to the target. So that's how the bolter works, and that's how the bolt pistol works. That's how the storm bolter works. That's even how the Vulcan mega bolter works, which is hilarious. But it is a two-stage charge, if you will, to launch the bolt to its target. It is a mass reactive fuse to hit, penetrate, and then detonate. A very effective, fear-inspiring, gory shock assault weapon that lends itself well in the hands of a Space Marine. So now that we know all of that fun stuff, let's look at some different patterns of bolters, because they're referred to as patterns, not necessarily marks, because you can have one pattern with several iterations known as marks. So it's a little bit different from power armor. But keep in mind, the standard issue bolter for Space Marines is 75 caliber, and the standard issue bolter for Space Marines in the Imperium in the post-heresy modern timeline of 40k is the Godwin Mark 5B pattern of Boltgun. It's the most widely used pattern that for Astartes in the Imperium. The Dark Angels use the Godwin Mark 3A. It is an older pattern of the Godwin, still in use by the Dark Angels chapter. Outside of that, it's pretty much the Mark 5B that people utilize. What's the difference between the 3A and the 5B? Couldn't tell you. Probably just visuals in terms of looking at the art and whatnot. But the Dark Angels are more than capable and more than destructive enough with their Mark 3A, so it must not be too much difference in the realm of performance. So if you're looking at the Godwin Mark 5B or Mark 3A or whatever, and you're going, that looks kind of like what non-Space Marines utilize as a bolter. Well, you're not wrong, because the Godwin has a pattern for humans, as it's called. It's got the Diaz pattern. The Godwin Diaz pattern, it is the standard pattern of bolter used by the Sororitas. And it's also the pattern that would be utilized by humans in general. There's another pattern that's utilized by the Adeptus Arbitus, the lock pattern. But the Godwin design, specifically the Godwin Diaz, is what you see on all the battle sisters, supposedly, according to Fluff. So, just a little bit of an honorable mention there. But the Godwin Mark 5B is the standard issue bolter. So, going back in time, we have the Heresy pattern. Much like the Heresy pattern of power armor, this isn't an official, or the Heresy Mark 5 power armor. The Heresy pattern Boltgun, much like that, is not an official pattern. It is just a hodgepodge of cobbled together non-standard bolters because they're cut off from regular sources of supply and maintenance, so they got to make do with what they got and keep them functioning as best they can. It's not an official pattern. It's not officially recognized as a pattern. It's just colloquially or collectively referring to the bolters that were kind of kit bashed together during the Heresy time period. So, with that said, to look at actual patterns of bolt guns, we got to go all the way back to the beginning, the dawn of the Great Crusade, when it became apparent that Volkite weapons really weren't going to cut it for the Space Marine legions as they grew in size and got further and further away from the cradle of humanity. Thus, the Phobos pattern of bolter was born. This is a handcrafted bolter. The numerous fabricators of Mars handcrafted this weapon. So it is a prized possession, being handcrafted. It also wasn't able to keep up with supply or keep up with demand necessarily, but it's the initial supply of bolt guns basically that the Astartes got, and it was produced as often or as much as possible until eventually it could not meet demand. But it is it was done so in this way so that Space Marines had the finest war gear at the time to conquer the stars. So the Phobos pattern of bolt gun is not a 75 caliber bolt gun. It's actually a 70 caliber bolt gun instead, but it causes sufficient carnage and is such a high quality of bolter that they are still considered really good bolt guns, basically. The performance and just sheer quality of these artificed weapons, basically, kept them in the hands of many units, even though they got access to the more standard 75 caliber bolt gun. So that's the Phobos, the oldest probably bolt gun pattern that we definitely know about. However, demand needed supply, and we got that in the form of the Umbra pattern bolter. This is one of, and really the only one we know of, earliest patterns of mass-produced bolters for the Great Crusade. It's actually a pattern that is still in use, widespread enough by Space Marine chapters, including some chapters that actually are able to still manufacture it. One good example is the Carcharodon. The Carcharodons, there we go, chapter, is a chapter frequently on its own, without much resupply or without capability of really getting any real help. They do everything on their own for the most part. So they have the capability to manufacture Umbra pattern of bolt guns, and they make use of them. So they are standard 75 caliber, and they are mass producible. Still of quality, it's just now you have numbers on your side. The Umbra pattern has the Umbra Ferox, which is a modified version of the Umbra, but that is the second oldest pattern of bolt gun that we know about. The third oldest is the Tigris pattern, named after its forge world that discovered the STC data to make this weapon. It's referred to as a sleek weapon, and despite being a very non-standard 60 caliber bolt, it was renowned for accuracy and the ability for the weapon's machine spear or the weapon spears to commingle and coordinate and work well with Space Marine power armor. So it worked well, synergized well with the Space Marine power armor, and it was a renownedly accurate, there we go, bolter right out the gate. So this put it in as a prized possession for certain Space Marines and certain legions that preferred the accuracy and synergy of the Tigris 60 caliber round as opposed to the 75 caliber. It's a non-standard round, however, and anything non-standard means supply chains become a bit more difficult. The forge world that created it was destroyed in the Horus Heresy, or at least it was irreparably damaged and unable to produce the bolter. However, other forge worlds and the like that produce it continue bearing the name Tigris in honor of that forge world. So those are your three oldest patterns of bolt guns. The Phobos being the great granddaddy, you could say. The Umbra being the oldest known mass-produced bolt gun pattern. And the Tigris being the most non-standard, but also the most accurate out the gate, you could say, of pattern of bolt gun. So all of that culminates to having the Godwin Mark 5B being the standard issue bolter in the Imperium post-heresy in the 41st millennium. Anyways, I'm going to do my best to be able to kind of label the pictures I use of what bolter you're looking at, but I am really bad at editing anything, so I'll see what I can do. But I'm going to do that because you don't really find these pictured with their name underneath it, so I'll do my best. And hopefully you enjoyed this kind of non-standard ramble. It was actually a lot of fun to think about how to do it once I really decided, yes, I'll do this since I had a request. And every other pattern of bolt gun or of bolt weapon system follows the same principles in terms of the ammunition and everything else. So one last thing of note is that you can have a Godwin or a Phobos or a Umbra or whatever utilize a drum magazine or a straight magazine or a sickle magazine or even be belt fed or whatever. It doesn't necessarily change the pattern, it's just how the ammunition is being fed. Just also depends on the design of the bit you're using at the time. And they can have a bayonet affixed to them as well. Anyways, that's that. So thanks very much for sticking through it. If you stuck through to the end, good on you. You might enjoy other rambles that I do, so feel free to hit that subscribe button and be part of future conversations. Which pattern of bolt gun that I mentioned is your favorite? I know I left out a whole bunch. So if you want to list one of those as well, feel free. But of the ones that I mentioned, the Godwin Mark 5B / Mark 3A, the Phobos, the Umbra or the Tigress. Which one do you like the most visually? Or whatever. Share it in the comment section. It's always fun to see what people like. The Phobos does look pretty cool. I will give it that. Anyways, that's it. So until next time, take it easy.